you for joining us today. The working group. And we hope you'll also consider submitting your comments in writing through the formal response to the Federal Register. Now, just for note, those comments will be posted online and available for the public to read. And the deadline for providing written comments is April 12th, 2023. The working is also continuing to host bi-monthly virtual listening sessions where members of the public deliver short presentations directly to the working group. And the listening sessions are going to continue as the working group conducts additional research and develops their final recommendations. They are filling up fast, I would say, though. So please do reach out to Liz if you'd like to schedule some additional time to talk with the working group in one of these listening sessions. You can also use the working group's website, spd15revision.gov, to learn more about different ways in which to engage in the process. You can find the full Federal Register notice here, as well as learn more about OMB's race and ethnicity standards, learn about my office, the Office of the Chief Statistician of the United States, as well as the working group. We are very much committed to a full, transparent revision process, guided by input by stakeholders and affected communities. And we're planning to complete these important revisions by summer 2024. Your participation is very important in this process. It is going to help us improve the way federal agencies safely and accurately both collect and use information on race and ethnicity of our person. So help us. We're here to hear your thoughts. And again, thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Ospinski, the chair, and Karen Battle, the co-chair of the Interagency Technical Working Group. And as Liz said, they'll give you some background on the statistical standards and the working group's initial proposals before we open the floor to all of you. So with
hello,
that,
thank you, Karen, and thank you. Sovereign about what the initial
related documents be placed online in a central location. And they specify the need for guidance on an implementation timeline for when agencies must meet the new standards. Also, statistical methods to collect and connect data that's collected under the current standards with data collected under revised standards. And this will be important as some data sets will be able to transition more quickly than others, and this will help preserve trend data. Procedures for collecting, processing, and reporting detailed racial and ethnic categories. Approaches for collecting race and ethnicity information when self-identification is not possible. Approaches for reporting data for respondents who select more than one race or ethnicity. Guidance on obtaining approval under the Paperwork Reduction Act to revise existing race and ethnicity data collections, and best practices for agencies to rely on when communicating SPD 15 revisions to stakeholders. So it is a significant undertaking for agencies to implement changes to censuses, surveys, and administrative forms that collect race and ethnicity data. And agencies need guidance to implement any potential SPD 15 revisions like those included in the working group's initial proposals. So in closing, I just want to stress again how important public feedback is to this process. The working group needs your input to help us understand how you view your racial and ethnic identity, how you want to use race and ethnicity data, and how you would like to be represented in federal data. In addition to the proposals that I just went over, the working group and OMB welcome comments and suggestions on any other ways that the standards could be revised to produce more accurate and useful race and ethnicity data. So today we want to listen to you and we want to hear your perspectives. So please take this opportunity to share your thoughts with the public, with the working group and the Chief Statistician of the United States. And whether you choose to speak at this meeting or just listen, we encourage all of you here today to visit the Federal Register notice to share your comments by April 12, which is really the best way to submit your comments. Now, we would like to turn it over to you and hear what you have to say. So Liz, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Karen. We will now open up the consultation for comments from tribal leaders about the initial proposals on the race and ethnicity standards. As a standard in tribal consultation, we will prioritize tribal leaders and for participation in this consultation. To provide comments, please use the raise your hand feature. We will call on tribal leaders first, followed by other tribal designees and interested parties. Once called upon, and unmuted, please include your name and tribal nation or tribal organization that you're representing today. So with that, we'll start taking questions. Like I said, please use the raise your hand feature and we will get started. At this time, we have no hands, so we'll open it up for tribal organizations and leaders who are serving as designees for their tribe. Okay, great. We have our first hand, Don Hool. You are now unmuted.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm Dawn Hool, Chippewa Cree, Sunsinger Consulting, representing the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. And I apologize, I'm out walking the dog, so the heavy breathing is the cause of that. I had a question regarding the census and the coordination with the Census Bureau. Just given that once this changes, this will be rolled out to every federal agency, correct? And then maybe if you could explain a little bit about if we mark all apply and you have, you know, non-Indians marrying Indians, how is the, I mean, to me, the impacts are going to be potentially could be very skewed where we're not, you know, the impacts to our housing, to healthcare, to whatever could be quite substantial if now everybody in that household is marking, you know, the 50 options that they have. I don't understand why, or how do we protect our data where it doesn't get skewed or mixed up with the others, you know, without sounding others would be everybody else, but that's not an enrolled member. So, I mean, that's just kind of my off the cuff view of what, you know, we always have to look at our impacts, especially what happened with Treasury, with the CARES money, and them using flawed data. So we definitely were very aware of the importance of this. So I appreciate that you guys are bringing it to light and wanting us to find a better solution. So I throw that out there. Not sure if you're able to make a comment, but definitely my clients will be submitting comments.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for your question and comment. And I thought I would just take a stab at addressing it. First of all, I think that one of the first things you asked was, you know, would the decennial census follow any changes made to the OMB standards for race and ethnicity? And the answer is yes, that the Census Bureau, as well as all other federal agencies, must adhere to OMB's standards for collecting and reporting and tabulating data on race and ethnicity. So if changes are made to the standards, the Census Bureau would then begin working to implement that. And in terms of the multiple responses, so one thing I just wanted to talk about with our proposal for a combined question. So sometimes we get the question, well, you know, what happens if someone checks American Indian, and Alaska Native and Hispanic, you know, in a combined approach? And so the first thing to say is that, as you noted, the proposed instructions are that individuals can mark all that apply. So here, this is the opportunity to tell us how you self-identify. And so for censuses or household surveys that had this type of question, both of those responses would be captured, Hispanic origin, as well as American Indian or Alaska Native. And the technical working group is thinking through guidance. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier when talking about the different proposals and the guidance that's needed. And so how to tabulate data that's been collected using a combined question where you have both race and ethnicity, for example, or just multiple responses. We want to make sure we provide guidance. And what I can tell you, though, is that last decade when the census was conducting research on a combined race and ethnicity question, the way that we handled something like this, where an individual reported being Hispanic and American Indian and Alaska Native from a combined question format, we count them in both populations. So what that would translate into would be this individual would be counted in the American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination group. That same individual would be counted in the Hispanic alone or in combination with another group. And we also would publish specific combinations. So you would see the count of those who identified as Hispanic and American Indian. And this concept that I just described really follows the exact same logic that we use right now with the race question, where we report out individuals who identify with multiple races. And so we've been using that same type of concept, a group alone versus a group that's reported alone or in combination. So we've been doing that since 2000. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's just an illustration of how we tackled that last decade during our testing. But absolutely, the working group would have to think through what guidance do we want to put out there for the federal agencies if this type of change were to be adopted. And if you have any suggestions or thoughts or ideas on that, we would love to hear it.
Am I still on mute? Or
Yes.
unmuted?
Oh, no, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. One other comment, and we'll definitely put this in writing. The last administration, tried to use the race-based approach with tribes, which diminishes our sovereignty and our relationship with the federal government. My concern is that now that this is happening as a new definition, does it give fuel to that agenda? And now you have multiple Supreme Court cases, especially with ICWA and these race-based type of comments. And so is maybe the solution is there's already a definition within this new effort that immediately says we are not race-based, we are politically protected entities. And so then you're setting the stage, it's there. I mean, if we're not going to update this definition, and it hasn't been updated since 97, we don't want another fill in the adjective of an administration of what we just suffered through this last one of impacting our sovereignty. And so, maybe that's one of the comments then that we put in writing is we're defining it and meaning the tribes, that it's automatic. You're not lumping us up with everybody else. We're not race-based, so that when we are attacked by whoever, it's, we're going on record that no, we have this special, unique relationship with the federal government. So, I mean, that's really not it's more of a statement or a comment, or it's more than a statement, but, and I'm not sure if you can comment on that, but how do we protect ourselves? And that's where I'm leaning towards with this new definition. We don't want to have any cracks in the definition that could potentially diminish or take away a right that we, barely can hold on to as now.
Thanks, Don. This is Liz Carr, and I certainly hear your concerns there and appreciate your comments. We will certainly take that into consideration and agree that putting that in writing will be really helpful. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And I definitely, just for the audience, I definitely did share this. I know there's the White House sessions going on right now, Native American entrepreneurs, women and entrepreneur, which I should be on that one too. But so there's competing calls right now. But I have been sharing it with my clients and my network about this, about your guys' open comment period, just so it gets some traction, given there's so much going on right now with tribes.
Well,
Yes,
great.
thank you so much. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, we really appreciate you helping us get the word out and get participation in this. And we also appreciate you breaking the ice and being the first one to raise your hand here today. That's an important step too.
Well, I apologize. Yes, you're welcome. I apologize for the heavy breathing. I'm now made it back to my house. So
great. Well, thank you so much, Don, and we'll touch base with you as well. Next up, we have David Whedon, and you are now unmuted.
Hello, Winiki suck everyone. Natasui Swinata and New Tomas Massive Wampanoag. Hello, everyone. My name is David Whedon. I'm a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. I also sit on the tribe's tribal council as an elected official. My question today is, not so much a question, but a statement that I do like the approach of having the designation box for identifying with a particular tribe. Native Americans, tribes rely on census data for submitting grants and trying to identify where areas of needs are for further programming development and things of that nature. So my concern is that though by allowing folks to just self-identify, I don't know that you're going to get accurate information, or if it's going to skew information to where I prefer to see, if somebody's identifying and self-identifying as association or enrolled member of a tribe, then entering tribal enrollment number so that it can be verified. I'm not sure if how much that complicates things, but at least you would be able to validate the information and ensure that it's accurate. Another concern is that I think nowadays that it's it reminds me of the bumper sticker. I was cool. I was Indian before it was cool to be an Indian, and so nowadays we have a lot of people that are um, uh, trying to reorganize tribes and things. And I'm not sure how that information is going to be factored in things. It's a much broader conversation, but I do feel as though as a federal recognized tribe, we should accurately capture enrollment, enrolled members data, opposed to self-identified tribal membership. And I do agree with the previous caller's statements as well. Thank you.
David, really appreciate the comments and the concern. And I'll say that Bob and Karen, as the chair and co-chair of the working group, will take those back to the working group to help inform what they do moving forward. So that's really helpful. The other thing I thought I would just share for everybody is you will probably see Karen, Bob, and I suspect Liz too, looking like we're typing or doing something. That's us doing shorthanded notes of the comments that you're providing, and of course we'll be able to look more wholly at them afterward. But that's what we're doing in the background too, is really just be able to capture the great inputs and insights that you all are providing.
Great, thank you, Mr. Whedon. Next up, we have Ms. Elizabeth Watanabe. Looks like she may have dropped off. Oh, there she is.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, your mic is now open.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Libby Watanabe. I'm an alternate delegate with the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board and Health and Wellness Director with the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe in Washington State. The Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board thanks you for hearing our concerns and conducting this tribal consultation on the OMB Federal Interagency Technical Working Group initial proposals for updating OMB's race and ethnicity statistical standards. We look forward to working with OMB on the further development and/or implementation of the statistical policy directive as revisions are finalized no later than summer 2024. And please note that the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board will follow up with a formal letter, including the comments that I am presenting today. Regarding the background of Federal Register notice with regard to item 1, American Indian or Alaska Native, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, and who maintains tribal affiliation or community attachments. The Portland Area Indian Health Board has 4 comments to share at this time. The Portland area tribes are in support of American Indian Alaska Native individuals being able to check their tribal affiliation or community attachment on federal survey forms. That is the first comment. The second comment is, as follow-up, we also believe it is critical that OMB forms honor the fact that tribal nations have been recognized as sovereign and their position is unique as a political status. Native peoples and governments have inherent rights and a political relationship with the U.S. government that does not derive from race or ethnicity. The third comment that I'd like to share is tribal members are citizens of 3 sovereigns, including their tribe, the United States, and the state in which they reside. They are also individuals in a multinational context with the rights afforded to any other individual. The final comment for this item that I'd like to share is we request OMB revise the format for self-response to include a drop-down list of the 574 federally recognized tribal nations in electronic forms that allow for this precision. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
You are welcome.
Great, thank you. The next comment can come from Ms. Marissa Spang, and your line is now open.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my my comment. I have first a question. One, with the option to select all that apply, I'm curious how that's going to affect the official count of those who identify as American Indian or Alaska Native, because currently, if you go to select that you have to, in order to be included in the official count as it currently stands as an American Indian or Alaska Native, you have to select not Hispanic, and you can only select American Indian, Alaska Native for race. But if you have a respondent who then says they're American Indian and also Black or white, they are taken out of the official count. And so that official count of American Indians is decreased because those who go to either identify as Hispanic or as an additional race beyond American Indian, they are taken out of the official count for trust responsibility services. And so I'm curious how the select all that apply is going to address that issue. And then I'll reserve my second comment following this response from you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. And as I was trying to explain earlier that this is really an issue that the technical working group needs to develop clear guidance on. If there are changes made to the standards, just how are we going to collect these data when there are multiple responses, and how are we going to tabulate those data? And so that is definitely something that we're working on. And if you have thoughts or ideas about that, we would very much appreciate them. And so the one example I can give is just how the Census Bureau approached this last decade when we were testing a combined race and ethnicity question, where again, we were able to capture all responses that were marked. And in terms of the tabulation, we were able to count individuals in each major category that they reported. So if someone said they were Hispanic and American Indian, then they would be counted in the American Indian, Alaska Native alone or in combination count. And if they said they were Hispanic, they would also be counted in the Hispanic alone or in combination count. And then we would also maintain the specific combination count. So people who said Hispanic and American Indian. And so again, this idea is very much in line with the logic we use right now when people report multiple races in the race question. It's called the maximum count, where we count them in each major group that they have reported. And so that's how we could possibly handle it. But again, we would love to hear any suggestions or thoughts or ideas as the working group figures out just what guidance do we want to provide on that very topic. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Just so I'm super clear, so the new approach would involve a more inclusive or maximum count when it comes to determining trust responsibility services for tribes. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm saying is that the data themselves, now the data may be used and applied for many different uses, but I'm just speaking to the counts themselves that are made available for funding decisions or just to know about the population counts. So we're not, we don't determine how the data are used in funding formulas or to make those kinds of decisions. But what we can do is make sure we have a wide variety of data available to be used. And so the counts that we could produce would have individuals counted in both the American Indian and Alaska Native alone or in combination group, as well as other groups that they have reported.
Okay, Karen, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then for the American Indian, Alaska Native, I'm just kind of curious why all the other categories have like sub options to further identify themselves, but the American Indian does not. There's just a write-in field.
Yes, so excellent question. So one thing I wanted to start off by talking about is that the check boxes and the examples that you see on that detailed example really are design strategies that have tested very well in terms of eliciting the detailed responses from respondents. And so that has worked well for most of the major race and ethnic groups. So you'll see the group associated with the check boxes, they tend to make up about 90% of that major race or ethnic group. So for example, the national origins listed under the Asian category represent about 90% of the Asian population. So we were able to kind of list the largest national origins for all of these groups, and we really capture the vast majority of the population doing so. But for the American Indian and Alaska Native population, as you know, there are hundreds of tribes and villages. And so we didn't have 6 groups that would make up 90% of the American Indian or Alaska Native population. So what we tested, the Census Bureau tested in the 2015 National Content Test, was in order to get as close to having check boxes for all of the groups as possible, we actually included 3 check boxes under the American Indian and Alaska Native category that represented the major concepts that are included in the American Indian and Alaska Native definition. So we tested 3 check boxes. One said American Indian, another one said Alaska Native, and then the third said Central and South American Indian. And so what we found when we tested that approach is that having those more general check boxes actually resulted in lower levels of detailed reporting for the American Indian and Alaska Native population. And so we felt like that really just wasn't working. And so what we did was we actually found that in that same study, that when we tested a combined question where we used a simple open write-in field with the American Indian and Alaska Native category along with the examples, that is what tested very well. And that's where we saw high percentages of the American Indian and Alaska Native population providing detail. So we found that through this research, again, this is what worked best for the American Indian and Alaska Native community. And so we took this as a lesson learned. And then in 2017, we did another census test where we used a combined question that looks very much like the proposal that we showed, where yes, the other race groups had the detailed check boxes and the American Indian and Alaska Native area had the open write-in line. And again, that is where we saw that there was a higher percentage of those who identified as American Indian and Alaska Native actually giving us the detail. So it was just, we tried to make that work using the detailed check boxes. But again, because there are just so many tribes and villages, putting 6 there, it wouldn't even cover, I think, 10% of the American Indian or Alaska Native population. We tried going with more general check boxes, but then we weren't getting the detailed reporting. So again, the open write-in field is what really tested best to elicit that detailed information from the American Indian and Alaska Native population.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Karen. And because just to follow up to that really quickly, so American Indian, Alaska Native is like a distinct political and legal status within the U.S. and the federal terminology around that. Mm-hmm. And so there's that piece to it. And the other part of this, like with the write-in, what I've seen is that you might check this box, American Indian or Alaska Native, and then somebody says, I'm from like the Whistling Water Clan or Salmon Clan, and that's not wrong, but it doesn't become meaningful information, I suppose. Because like if you're Blackfeet, or for Crow, I'm Northern Shining Crow, by the way. Like in Crow we have different clans, but then that clan might also be present under other American Indian tribes. So I just wanted to bring that issue forward as well. And I'm going to stop taking up the airspace, and I want to thank you for your time.
Well, again, thank you very much for your comment, and we will definitely take that back to the working group to discuss further. Thank you.
Great, thank you. At this time, I'm showing, oh, excuse me, I see that Ms. Watanabe has re-raised her hand, so I will unmute and you can go ahead with your comment.
Good morning again. Thank you very much. The comments that I'm sharing are again through the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board, and so I am bringing those forward. And the couple of comments that I have are related to the current review of SPD 15, collection of more detailed data and multi-race identification. And I do agree that it is complex to gather the data of the 574 federally recognized tribal nations. However, I think it's vital to do so because the 574 federally recognized tribal nations are indigenous to the United States, and they do, the data collection does impact how resources and funding flows. So although it may be more work on the part of OMB, I would appreciate consideration of the comments that I do have to share. The OMB working group noted review of potential changes to minimum reporting categories, including how to address detailed race and ethnicity groups, question format and terminology, and how collection could be improved. The other comment that I have is we do support collecting more data within the American Indian Alaska Native section to better understand geographic distribution, socioeconomic profiles, or community-specific attributes that may be helpful for agencies who are collecting information associated with forms. We do request that choosing a tribal nation from a drop-down list be optional. And again, these comments will be included in the letter sent by the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. Some general comments that I have to share. The existing and proposed questions for collecting information on American Indian and Alaska Native people do not allow for explicit acknowledgement of the political status and identity of members of sovereign tribal nations. And I appreciate the comments earlier by Ms. Battle, the maximum count or the count in each major group will be selected and counted is appreciated. And I myself am a member of the Southeast Alaska Native Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian tribes. So I would be selecting the checkbox for each of those three tribes, and counting all of those selections I think is really important. Some of us are mixed tribal ethnicity. So the other comment that I have is we suggest following a similar pattern as the other groups with check boxes for American Indian or Alaska Native tribe or corporation. And again, with Alaska Tribal Organization, due to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, there are tribal corporation designations. And for example, I belong to the Sea Alaska Corporation and the Gold Belt Village Corporation. And so having those included would be wonderful, as well as First Nation Metis from Canada, Indigenous tribes from Central and South America, and then the box to write in specific affiliation associated with the aforementioned areas. The question that I do have is, will there be guidance and tools for how written values will be evaluated and reconciled with the checkboxes? And I can pause here if anyone would like to respond to that. I do have a few more comments after that. Thank you.
Sure, I can say a few words. So thank you again, Elizabeth. And I guess I'll start by just saying we are really trying to do an awful lot with one question here, and it's a very important question. And really our goals are exactly what we're talking about, right? We want the best quality data, which means we want it to be accurate. We don't want to be undercounting groups. And we also want it to be as useful as possible. So that means understanding as well as we can the different ways that federal programs are using this data, state, local programs are using this data. So comments that you can give us to that effect, so, kind of specifically pointing to programs, if you have interest there, are really helpful to us. So we really appreciate you weighing in with those kinds of comments. And in terms of the guidance for coding, this is something that we are definitely thinking about. This, I think harkens back to some of Karen Battle's earlier comments about the guidance that we're thinking about for how to present multiracial data in a way that isn't obscuring identities. But that's another big issue that we are looking at is what do we do with the write-in comment here, and what kind of guidance would be useful or appropriate or necessary. So again, if you have thoughts on how we could do that in order to be as accurate and as useful as possible, then we really encourage you to submit those to us.
Thank you, Mr. Savinsky. And again, the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board will have specific written comments to send in to you folks. I do have 4 other items to share, so I'll just continue on with those if there's no objection.
Yes, that's fine. We have no other hands up at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. The next comment that I have, and yeah, I'll just go into it. Well, the new proposed detailed question, or figure 2, allows for American Indian, Alaska Native individuals to write in specific tribal affiliations. The data collection instrument should also allow for more easy disaggregation of individuals from domestic sovereign nations of the U.S. and indigenous people from other parts of the Americas. We recommend consideration of tribal consultation on developing policies for allowing appropriate access to disaggregated data on individual tribal nations, and ensure that this access doesn't conflict with tribal sovereignty or tribal data sovereignty of individual tribal nations. The next 3 comments that I have are, we recommend federal agencies develop replicable sorry, that's not a smooth word to say, methods, tools, and data sets for population estimates and denominators at multiple geographic levels, particularly for smaller populations, and ensure that these estimates are available at least yearly on a regular schedule. The other comment that I'd like to share is, we recommend assessment of the impact of the change in standards on conducting multi-year and trend analyses, particularly for smaller populations. And the final comment that I have to share is, state and local jurisdictions are testing and implementing different methods for disaggregating and presenting data on people who identify as multiple races. It would be useful to review and compile findings and lessons learned from these efforts. And the final comment, there will likely never be a single survey or approach that works for all groups, but we with the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board do look forward to continuing to engage in the conversation with the survey approach and tools used, as well as education on new surveys, so that American Indian and Alaska Native people are completing them appropriately so that we can gather and mine the best data possible. Thank you.
I just want to thank you for all of those comments. I think they're really thoughtful and great. And hearing that you'll be sharing those in writing too is much appreciated. So we can make sure we also get the nuance and the details of those thoughtful comments. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. At this time, we're showing no other hands. So just as a reminder, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature and we will call on you and unmute you.
Ms. Carr, I do have one more.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. I do have one more recommendation, and thank you for being patient with me as I gather my thoughts on these complex issues. I do recommend that the OMB consult with tribal epidemiology centers on recommended analysis techniques, and that recommendation is due to tribal epidemiology centers being in the game, so to speak, of surveys, methods for surveying, and what works and doesn't work for quite some time, and have developed good survey methods and tools. And we would greatly appreciate coordination with tribal epidemiology centers going forward with the OMB survey tool. And we'll also include that in the written comments that the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board does send to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And that comment and previous ones, I really appreciate that they highlight the importance of all of us working together to get the best quality data. And you certainly have tools available to you and networks that we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of and all working together to get the most accurate data we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savinsky.
Thank you. The next hand I see is Patricia Whitefoot, and you are now unmuted.
Good morning. This is Patricia Whitefoot. I'm a citizen of the Yakama Nation in Central Washington State, and I also serve as the Education Chair Committee for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, which is the 56 tribes here in the Northwest. That includes the states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Northern California, Southern Alaska, and Western Montana. So just wanted to share that we have a work group that's been working on this particular issue, particularly as it pertains to Native students. And just listening to the discussion earlier, I agree with all the comments that were made thus far. Just as a beginning, we have resolutions that are on record with the Affiliate Tribes of Northwest Indians, as well as resolutions in place on this issue with the National Congress of American Indians as well, particularly around student identity issues. And so one of the first recommendations is I know that the American Indian Alaska designation includes the South and Central America. I would like to recommend a separate distinction only for American Indians, Alaska Natives of North America. And the reason being, you've already heard from the numerous speakers regarding the political status that we have as sovereign nations who have Indian treaties, agreements, et cetera, with the federal government. And I don't know that Central and South America have that. So for that reason, that's a strong recommendation that we have a standalone box for American Indian Alaska Native of North America. So in the work with leaders and educators over several years on this issue, I do have one question before I go on to my other comment. How many Native representatives are on this work group that you're speaking to?
So maybe I'll take that one. So the members of the working group that is developing the initial recommendations were selected by their agencies for their technical expertise in measurement design and for their expertise in the use of federal data. And so they were not selected to be necessarily representative of different groups that we're measuring here. But what we are doing is making every effort to get input from affected communities through consultations like this, through the public comment period, the listening sessions, and we want to make sure that we are hearing those voices and getting that input in. And the working group is taking all of these public input very, very seriously. I can tell you that we are taking all of this back and working hard to make sure we get it right, and we respect the expertise of everyone on this call and the members of the public that we hear from in the written comments.
So I take that to mean that there are no Native American, Indian, Alaska Natives on the working group.
I do not know the racial or ethnic status of all of the members of the working group.
Okay, so I would like to just make a strong recommendation to see whether we can get one. I know you've already been working for some time, but there definitely, it sounds like a need for, someone from American Indian, Alaska representation on the working group. Thank you. So my next comment, and I think you've already answered it, with American Indian, with the default statement of Hispanic or not Hispanic, I think it sounds like that's going to be taken care of. So we're not going to have a default statement there or question. Is that correct?
I could start with this one. I think that is one of the proposals that is on the table right now with this initial set of proposals, but we are also seeking feedback on that from the public to help inform the working group to make a final recommendation on whether to combine the race and ethnicity question, if that's what you're referring to.
Yes. Okay, so then I guess I would strongly recommend that we not have that kind of question again. So if you have Hispanic at the top and non-Hispanic, unfortunately, we had individuals that did mark Hispanic because of mixed race, and then they were automatically defaulted to being Hispanic rather than American Indian, Alaska Native. That is a critical issue that needs to be addressed because we have Hispanic American Indian students and families that are part of our community. And so that automatic default to being Hispanic is, blurs our total population in our school systems. The other one has to do with, so did you understand what I said by that?
Yeah, Bob, do you want to take that one just to make sure you're
I'm not sure I'm totally, could you restate it for me to make sure I completely understand?
Okay, so the first question on the surveys ask if, and this also goes with school information registration, the very first statement asks whether you're Hispanic or not Hispanic.
Right.
And if our tribal families mark Hispanic because they're mixed race, then their count is automatically defaulted to being Hispanic.
I see what you're saying. So this is back to the issue that Karen Battle was speaking to
right.
Initially, right? It's like the data will exist. The same data will exist in combined or separate question. We currently have people who are making multiple selections. We will continue to have people making multiple selections. And the question is, how does the data then get reported out or used? And I think we mentioned what we are looking at in regards to that, which is there guidance that we can put out that will be useful? We don't have a lot of control over the way that individual schools or states or others might use the data, but what we can do is make sure that the data in the most usable formats is available to them. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to give them as much data as possible so that they're not having to lump everyone into a multiracial category category, or just report them out as solely Hispanic and losing other selections. So we are definitely thinking about the best way to do this through guidance where we can and encouragement where that's the only tool we have available.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Look forward to that. And again, on agency guidance, would like to strongly recommend that we get Native people that are part of that process as well, that are representative American Indian, Alaska Native as well. Because what this ends up doing is our students then become non-existent, they become erased, misrepresented, etc. So particularly in schools, you have in public education where 95% of our Native students attend public education. However, the staff that are in our public schools do not represent our families. And so with that, what ends up happening is the staff just checkbox them as automatically white when they're American Indian, Alaska Native. We have a number of programs that exist in our schools our students may be eligible for. However, once they become identified as white, then they lose out on the various programs that they're eligible to be served with. One of them being just cite three of them, such as the Title VI Indian Education Act resources, the JOM, Johnson O'Malley, and then the migrant education. So it's important that we get this right so we can make certain students receive these resources in our school systems. And then finally, I just want to say there's so much education that needs to go on with this, particularly with public school staff, simply because of our numbers. Our staff are not at the front desk when families are signing up for school, and these kinds of resources are available for them. So there's a need for education and further consultation, at not only the community, state, but in our case, I'm saying the regional level, because our tribes work together collaboratively, and we need to make certain that we're all on board. So as you continue to move forward, please know that, if you need guidance on agency representation, that we have individuals that are here to make certain we have the kind of representation that's important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Whitefoot. The next speaker we have is back to Ms. Watanabe, please.
Thank you. Good morning again. Appreciate your patience as new questions arise in my mind. And I really want to thank Chairwoman Whitefoot for her comments and discussion. Really do appreciate those comments. I also support her request to have an American Indian Alaska Native serve on the Federal Interagency Technical Work Group on race and ethnicity standards, and would recommend at least one, perhaps more. And those thoughts raise a couple of questions in my mind. And the first one is, what are the number of those serving on the work group, and which agencies serve on the work group? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So this is a major undertaking, and it affects almost every agency across government. So when we were forming the work group, what we did was we invited the 24 CFO Act agencies. These are the kind of the 24 largest agencies named under statute. And we also invited the 13 principal statistical agencies. I see Bev has kindly brought up our logo here that shows the agencies that are participating. So in the inner circle here, we have the statistical agencies, and on the outer circle, we have the CFO Act agencies who were invited. Almost everyone we invited is participating, and our group has grown over time to include additional staff from other agencies to help us, because there's just a lot of work to do here to test proposals, to be doing this kind of public outreach. And so we have very broad participation from across government on this working group.
I'll just add to that, if you go to the SPD 15 revision.gov website, there also is the listing of all the agencies participating. So while it may have been very hard to see that on the slide deck, you can see that information on the website.
Perfect, thank you. So based on the slide that was shown, it looks like there's 36 plus federal agencies, including the Health and Human Services, that is the umbrella organization for the Indian Health Service. And if you have the representative for the Indian Health Service, if they serve on the working group, or if they do not, just again, request consideration of Chairwoman Whitefoot's request to have American Indians and Alaska Natives serve on this group. And based on the number of federal agencies that were offered participation in the group, recommend a robust number of seats be available and offered to American Indians and Alaskan Natives across the nation. And also just appreciate your hearing that suggestion. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Whitefoot, I see that your hand is again raised.
Yes, because of that recommendation, I would recommend that we have someone from the Department of Education, Office of Indian Education, also be on this work group, because I heard you say that the number has grown over time, and I don't think it'd be at any harm by adding additional individuals, because our young people are the highest, the largest population of American Indian, Alaska Natives in many of our tribes. And so that representation, particularly from the Department of Education, Office of Indian Education Program, would be critical as you continue to move forward. So I make that recommendation as well, including the Indian Health Service recommendation too.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But yeah, what we're doing now is we're asking our primary representatives from at the department level to be coordinating with all of the relevant offices within their departments. And so because we have a proposed recommendation to a change on the definition for American Indian and Alaska Native, that includes all of the bureaus, agencies, offices within the departments that that work on those issues. So we are asking our working group members to be making sure that they are coordinating with those offices.
Right, and I don't think that's sufficient. Just giving my experience, my 40 years experience in public education. If you're not represented at the table, then you're left out. And so it's like a whole educational process. I'm thinking that the Indian education staff would have to do with the representative, which was similar to my work experience in working as a state supervisor for Indian education at the state superintendent's office, being the only Indian there. And then you have to educate your colleagues and then also public educators as well. I think that this is a strong recommendation to somehow include Indian education, because this has been, one of the priorities of Indian education. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree that there's a lot of education that needs to take place, and we are committed to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Patsy. Really appreciate those comments. At this time, I'm not showing any other hands. As a reminder, if you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand feature. Okay, I'm seeing Ellen Provost. You are now unmuted. Ms. Provost? Okay, we will move on to Dr. Christy Prairie Chicken. You are now unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much. I definitely want to support Chairman Whitefoot's recommendation for education to be there. That's critical. I also wasn't able to see, is the Veterans Administration on your task force?
Yes, they are.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's the only question I had. Appreciate it.
Ms. Provost, I'm unmuting you again. Do you have a comment? Okay, we will move on to back to Ms. Donhul.
Hi, could the team explain kind of the next step? So if this is the initial proposal, my assumption is there'll be a summary of the various comments that were received from the tribal agencies and our tribal organizations, as well as the tribes. And then will there be a proposed rule, or maybe walk us through how this will roll out, especially with the time frame that you've outlined?
Sure. So you mentioned the time frame. So I think we mentioned it at the very beginning, but I'll bring it up again now, which is that we are working towards the goal of publishing new standards, new rules for how this gets collected in the summer of 2024. And in the time leading up to that, we have a lot of work to do. And so right now, what we are doing is, and this is early on in the process too, I want to say that we're doing this purposefully pretty early on in the process, is getting public input and doing these types of consultations, because this is what is guiding our work as this working group develops their final recommendations to OMB. So before the final recommendations can be developed, we have to do a lot of outreach, we have to do a lot of testing, we have to do a lot of listening and learning, and we're going to use that to guide the writing of that final report. So then the working group will deliver final recommendations to OMB that will be similar in format, at least to what you see in the Federal Register now, to say these are the things that we think could be improved and how to improve them. We're also working on where we think there should be accompanying guidance. We've talked about that several times on this call, and being as helpful to OMB as possible in terms of getting that guidance out quickly and effectively. So that is the process that we're going to be going through for the next year or so now. Once we give the final recommendations to OMB, then OMB will make their decisions on what the actual changes to the standards will be, and then those changes will be published in the Federal Register notice. So you can think of what we put out now. This isn't a rulemaking, it's not a regulation. But you can think of what we put out now almost as analogous to an NPRM, right? We're putting something out to say, hey, the government is intending to do a thing, and this is what it may look like, and we want your feedback on it.
So there will not be another opportunity for us to comment. This will be the one time.
This is your best opportunity to comment now. And again, like I said, it's early in the process, so that can be effective comments before decisions have been made and before we've done a lot of testing. So that's why we want to make sure we're getting in as much comment now early as possible. We are going to continue to hold what we call listening sessions throughout the process. So I think there is you can use the tribal consultation email address below. We also have an email address for the working group that you can send to, and you can schedule a 30-minute meeting with the working group kind of throughout our process while we're writing. But I think we mentioned that those sessions are booking up pretty fast. We already have them scheduled out for another 6 months or so at least, and it's just the farther down the road we get before getting your input, the harder it is for us to make adjustments based on that input. So we really do want to encourage everyone to be getting their thoughts in now through the Federal Register notice.
If I can add to, I think also they can reach out to Liz directly if they would like to have one of those opportunities with the listening sessions. But I'll also add that so far we have over 6,500 comments, and we still have a month to go and this is the written comments to the Federal Register notice, and still have a month to go. So we're anticipating we will probably have 10,000 or more comments. And the working group's process is really deliberate. They look at each and every one of those comments and really are thoughtfully integrating it, taking a look to understand similarities or differences across comments. So while the time period may seem a bit long on what's going to happen between April when the Federal Register notice closes and next summer, it's to be able to go through that. It's to be able to integrate the comments that you all are sharing today. We're getting comments in public town halls that are happening this week. We're getting comments in the listening sessions, and then doing some of that initial testing to be able to, from a technical perspective, understand if we were to go about with certain changes, there might be areas where we need to do some additional testing before making that recommendation to the working group. So there's a lot of steps involved. So you still have the opportunities to think about different ways in which to provide that feedback, but this next month window is going to be that critical time period to put your input in. And this is one of the places this counts, you know, that we're very much using the feedback that you're sharing today and the questions that you have today.
Is there a separate comment tracker for tribes? I don't know if that's the right word, but
yes, Dawn, you can submit your comments via the Federal Register, but you can also submit them via email to tribalconsultation@omb.eop.gov, which is directly to the OMB Tribal Advisors inbox, and we'll be sure to track those separately.
Okay, because my concern is if of the 6,000 comments, you know, maybe there's only 200 tribes that have submitted comments so far, or there's 2. I don't know. But we'd want to be able to advocate that, hey, you know, we need more comments, and we've only had a few, but there's so much going on right now that I just want to make sure that tribes are submitting something.
Absolutely, and we'll send out a reminder in the next week to all of our groups so that folks are reminded to take a look at it and submit comments.
Okay. Well, I blew up my clients' phones while we were on this call, and everybody's obligated to something else, and it's election times for several of the tribes too. So a lot of people this is not on their radar. So I'm trying really hard to make sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I fully understand the multiple obligations tribal leaders are committed to. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to successfully get their comments through, written comments, and thank you very much for blasting out to your clients. Really appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Yep. Next hand is Ms. Sandra Mitrovich, excuse me. And you are now unmuted.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carr. This is Sandra Mitrovich with the National Congress of American Indians and enrolled citizen Time Maidu and descendant Yamani Maidu in Northern California. I'm just wanted to make a comment, and because I think it was crucial for some of the comments that were just made about participation in both organizations and also comments back. I want to first and foremost thank everyone for their comments thus far. Many of the recommendations are recommendations that the National Congress of American Indians, in collaboration with other national Native organizations, Native American Rights Fund, Lawyers Committee, and other convening groups have been working through in partnership with the Leadership Conference and in coalition with some of our other task force groups. So I just wanted to mention on this call, for those that were asking, there are some additional convenings occurring. I know there is a wonderful, as Patricia Whitefoot mentioned, with an academic group convening that recently convened and is putting together comments, along with the Native Counts group, with the Lawyers Committee with Jim Tucker, and also with the Leadership Conference with several different convenings. So I just wanted to mention that for anyone on this call that is looking forward to any additional working groups or opportunities to participate in discussion. We do have a convening coming up next week in DC on the 21st that we'll be providing some comments back on in person, but then we'll also have an additional convening to start putting together some other coalition response to this, so that we make sure, as I think Dawn mentioned, have a robust response from all of our communities. So That is just something I wanted to mention, and you can reach out to myself from NCAI if you would like to participate in some of those discussions with the coalitions. And my email is just smitrovich@ncai.org. And I just wanted to mention that and thank everybody for their comments thus far.
Sandra, thank you very much for sharing that. I think that is very, very helpful information. And I know that I think at least a few of the members of the technical working group are also scheduled to be participating in some of the events that you mentioned, like the Native Counts call with Jim Tucker. So we look forward to also participating along with you where possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you so much, Ms. Mitrovich. Really appreciate those comments and certainly look forward to getting feedback from all of those working groups. The next caller we have in the queue is Kanza Jones Mohammed, and you are now unmuted. Ms. Jones Mohammed?
You're showing is still muted on my screen, if that means anything.
Yes, I asked to unmute.
Ah.
Looks like some technical difficulties on perhaps their end. So we will put them on pause for now and go back to Ms. Whitefoot. Ms.
Yes.
Whitefoot, if you'd like to make a comment, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, you're live now, so please feel free to go ahead.
Oh, no, I wasn't trying to make a comment. I'm sorry. I'm picked up my granddaughter from school.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much. Ms. Jones Mohammed, you are now unmuted. Do you have a comment?
Thank you. Yes, I did. I don't know what's happening with this internet. But my father was a tribal member of the Shinnecock Nation in Long Island, New York. And the Shinnecock Nation entered into a treaty with the United States, I believe, in 2010. And unfortunately, my father had suffered a stroke, and his mental ability and physical ability were really diminished during this particular process. But my father's mom, my grandmother, Muriel Green Fenty, her mom, Algatha Green, Phoebe Miller, and Elias Green, my great-great-grandparents, and Jahu Miller and Ann Cuffey were all, indigenous people to the Shinnecock Nation and to the Blackfoot Nation. I personally and my 6 siblings, we are not members of the Shinnecock Nation. We are technically out of treaty. I could do the things that need to be done in order to be brought back into treaty. I have 30 first cousins who also are out of treaty, as well as an uncle who's about 80 years old, my father's brother, who is out of treaty. And in the comments that came forward on the Tuesday, March 14th hearing, there were a lot of Black Americans talking about being recategorized as American mulatto, colored, and then eventually Negro, and now they are considering themselves Black Americans. And I don't know within this tribal process, because so much of that, is within treaty, and because there is a whole governmental department that really does deal with Indigenous affairs, whether there has been any thought or consideration for having an Indigenous out of treaty category. There are people who do know their national ties. Like, I know my ties, I know who my family is, it kind of is what it is. And then there, I think, are people who want to be considered Black American, who know that they don't necessarily come from an enslaved African background. I happen to have that. I have the bill of sale for my great grandmother who was imported to the United States. From her bill of sale says the Congo. I am also very familiar with my great grandfather's family being John Martin, who is my great grandfather, but he was an Irish immigrant. I'm very full and complete on who I am as a person and what some of the nuances look like culturally within the United States over, the last 200 years and what the impacts have been on different people. And I don't know whether or not someone would voice that here, but because I have the opportunity to be here today, I did want to put that into public record because I feel like between, I don't have a relationship per se with the Shinnecock Nation in Long Island, but I think there are people who are like me that do have this knowledge. And I think it in this time of cultural relevancy, in this time to Biden's point of what he wanted the data disaggregation group to do, we are old enough and mature enough now as a nation to actually start investigating these types of things that really are outliers, but they're relevant. So I just wanted to put that conversation here. I am drafting an email, to also go to the tribal consultation at the OMB. And I hope that you consider this because I think there are people who would consider themselves biracial or multi-ethnic if given the opportunity to have that option on the US Census.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate you sharing your personal perspective and family history for experiences, and certainly will, I think, share that back with the working group as they're thinking through things. But that does, in a part, what a small piece that I'll share on that is that intention to be able to have the being able to mark as many that you identify with. That is an important piece of what these proposals are suggesting and is available right now in the existing statistical policy standard. But thank you.
Yes, thank you. We do have another hand up. It's Ms. Watanabe again. You are now unmuted.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I do have a request to consider hosting a second tribal consultation and have that coordinated via a Dear Tribal Leader letter that is sent to the Indian Health Service and tribal epidemiology centers. I think perhaps with the recent change in leadership with the Indian Health Service director position, the initial Dear Tribal Leader letter may have been lost, as well as with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and how that's changed everybody's lives and kind of turned our worlds upside down. So I do request a second tribal consultation, and I have a very big concern that there is no American Indian or Alaska Native serving on the Federal Interagency Technical Work Group on Race and Ethnicity Standards. And so I do want to reiterate my concern there and the request for a second tribal consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your concerns, and we will definitely take that back and consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Battle.
Thank you so much. And at this time, we are no longer showing any hands. If you have a question, please use the raise your hand function to make a question, or excuse me, ask a question or make a comment. It looks like Mr. Joe Williams has raised his hand, and you are now unmuted, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address. One of the things that quickly come to mind is that we're dealing with federally recognized tribes, which is a government-to-government agency, and agreement and with an opportunity to work together. I'm kind of questioning the hesitancy of not involving federally recognized tribes. And I'm calling from Alaska. And keep in mind, Alaska is a very large state, what goes on in my part of the country of Alaska does not go on in the interior part of Alaska. So my comment and fear is that here we are trying to get in the back door. Seems to me that we should have been invited in the front door and giving the representation that's duly needed, in my mind, required to federally recognized tribes. And I am the president of our local federally recognized tribe. So just keep that in mind. I, again, in reiteration, question the hesitancy of, well, we'll get back to you. In my mind, that often said, to me, that's not good enough. To me, what's good enough is we will put your region down and get in contact with you. That's all I have, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Joe. You know, as I said, we are trying to reach out now in what is early in this particular effort, but Karen Battle, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how we are building on previous efforts that also included outreach to American Indian Alaska Native tribes.
Yes, thank you, Bob. So when you take a look at the proposals that are in the Federal Register notice, you may see some links and other indication that there's a lot of research that was done and outreach and consultation and engagement to get us to the point where we are today. And a lot of the research regarding like combining the race and ethnicity questions and including a Middle Eastern or North African category and disaggregating data, a lot of that is based on research the Census Bureau did last decade, where we did a lot of extensive consultation with tribal leaders, with our national advisory committees, and we have worked with the National Congress of American Indians and the Alaska Federation of Natives, and have been able to the good fortune to go out and join their conventions and annual meetings to talk about this research. So I guess I just wanted to make that point that a lot of engagement has taken place over the last decade, every step of the way, where we have conducted research right after the 2010 census and during the 2010 census, in the middle of last decade and towards the end of last decade. And so I just wanted to make that point. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. And at this time, we're showing no further hands. As a reminder, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the raise your hand function, and we will unmute you. I am not seeing any more hands, so with that, we can go ahead and close today's consultation. Again, thank you all for joining and appreciate, excuse me, I see a hand all of a sudden. Let's see. Allie Moore, you are now able to speak. Thank you.
First, before I speak, I am not Native American, so I wanted to know if this is a good forum. I am an ally, so I could reserve my comments for the next 2 town halls.
Yeah, I think that would probably be best, but appreciate your allyship for sure.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Just as a reminder, the Federal Register notice is open through April 12th, 2023. We look forward to receiving your comments on the updating of the federal race and ethnicity standards on federalregister.gov, which is the best way to provide comments to these initial proposals. You can also reach the Federal Register notice from a link on the working group's website, spd15revision.gov. You can respond to any proposals or questions in the notice that you like, and you can send any thoughts about how to improve the standards, even if they aren't related to the ones of the working group's initial proposal. As a reminder, you may also submit, and I encourage you to submit your tribal consultation comments via email to tribalconsultation@omb.eop.gov. Additional information will be added to the SPD15 revision.gov website throughout the process, so be sure to check back for updates. If you would like to participate in a public town hall, there will be one hosted on Friday, March 17th, and another on Saturday, March 18th, both at 2 p.m. Eastern. All the town halls will follow a similar format as today's, with an overview of the standards of the initial proposals and followed by public input. Please visit the SPD15revision.gov to learn more about participating in one of those town halls. Again, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate and value our relationships with the tribal governments across Indian country and look forward to engaging with you all moving forward throughout this process. It's a really exciting opportunity for the federal government to improve the way that we collect and measure race and ethnicity. And again, we value your partnership and engagement in this process. So thank you very much. And we will be in touch with emails and information to follow. So thank you again.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. This was great feedback today.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but freed people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations.
I had no idea that that church I was running by every day was something my grandfather established.
This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of its time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million. And then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Overnight, it's like, oh, it's no longer the quarters, now it's Lincoln Heights. Oh, so now we get to use Abraham Lincoln for our name. And you think about all the other people that they could have used, but they picked Lincoln. And I think that's sort of a stereotypical of what they do.
There wasn't any black restaurants. As far as black business and weed, it wasn't none.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Why has it been easier for other groups than us?
Because of anti-black hatred.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR room, don't tune in.